Welcome back to Frank's Model Aviation Workshop. This is episode 3 in the Carl Goldberg Sukhoi SU26MX build series. In this episode we are going to start the build of the wing. And to start off, we need to seam together 3 sheets of 3 by 1/16 by 36 inch balsa sheets times 4. So that'll cover the leading and trailing edge sheeting of the bottom and top of the wing. So I'm going to do that off camera since I've already covered seaming balsa. I'll get that done, and when we come back we'll be ready to start cutting these panels to size. So if you like this type of content, please consider subscribing to my channel. Hit that notification bell so that you can be notified of future episodes of this build series, and please like and share my videos. It just might help someone get their plane finished and in the air. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, I got my sheets all made. Getting the bottom sheets here, top sheets. I saved the best wood for the top. And I also marked the inside with some marks so that I know it's on the inside, so I don't make any more mistakes and put the inside on the outside. So we will get set up. I'll put some wax paper down and we'll get started building this wing. The next step is to cut 3 1/4 inch trailing edge strips from the sheets that I just made. So I'm going to use this dark half for the trailing edge. I will go ahead and mark 3 1/4 inch. That's one. Okay, so I'll set these aside until they are needed. Plus these bottom leading edge sheetings. So the instructions start off by telling you to put both wing halves of the plans on the board and line them up with the arrows. And then you get down after you finish doing one half, it tells you that completes the right half, and set that aside and build the left wing in the middle of the building board. So I'm just going to go ahead. I already got the dang plans all taped up, so I'm not untaping them. We'll just do it to build the right wing half and then the left wing half. Got all my lumber ready to go, so we'll get set up and start building this right wing. Okay, the first thing it says to do is line up the trailing edge sheeting and pin in place. And then it says to mark the spar marks on the sheeting. So that's the next thing we're going to do. I'm just lightly marking those because I don't want to create a weak spot in my sheeting. Got to use marker on this because the pen won't write on the glue. Okay, it also says to align a straight edge to the center of the wing and trim the sheeting. Okay, now we need to glue a spar in place. So the way I'm going to do that is I need to first trim an edge. And I'm going to do this just like I do everything else. I'm going to line up one end, put a pin in the other end, and then we'll put a straight edge in there. Now the way I'm going to do this, because it's such a long span, I'm going to use thin CA to glue it in place. That thin CA wicks right through there to the other side. Here's something I should include here. This is the Generation 2 or version 2 of the Sukhoi. And they have you remove the temporary tab from the laser cut sheet and tape to the lower edge of rib number 2. So here's rib number 2. And the laser cut tab is like that. It's flat. It's not shaped. So I did one off camera, and you have to slowly but surely get it to fit, and then you tape it just like that. And because this thing flexes and stuff, I made sure that it was pinned solid to the ruler, so I know that this is the exact height it should be when I go to pin it to the plan. So I'm going to tape all these tabs that are break off, get taped to either side of the ribs. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll be back in business. So right now I'm kind of labeling all the parts, or all the ribs anyway, and I'm going to get all those punched out, and I'm making templates of them on the back side of the fuselage plans, so that way if I crash this thing I'll be able to reproduce it, except for the leading edge, but you know, you can make a leading edge fairly simple. So anyway, that's what I'm doing. All I'm doing is taping the tabs to either side of the ribs. Be back when I'm done and we'll start putting them in place. Okay, got all the ribs punched out and the tabs taped on. These two I had to customize to fit right. And as you can see here, the old number 4 rib on one of the sheets, this was the end of the sheet. Well, actually it wasn't the end of the sheet. It was actually die cut like that. And I was like, what the heck's going on here? So I had to butt glue a sheet onto it, sand it smooth, and then use the other number 4 to form the rest of the rib. That was weird. I've never had that happen before in any Goldberg kit, but I've never built a Sukhoi, so I don't know. Any of you guys ever had that happen? Anyway, crisis averted. Now we are on to starting the wing build. Okay, so what you see here is the rib spacing with a whole bunch of metal pieces holding it at 90 degrees. And these are the exact spacings as per the plan and the instructions. Supposed to use this. Oops, I just moved my rib. Supposed to use this rib spacing gauge, and so anyway, what I'm trying to get at is if all those trailing edges are where they're supposed to be, which they are right now, I have one rib number 3, you can see is low. Rib number 2 is on, and the rest of them they're pretty good. And I'll show you that this leading edge is perfectly straight. Let's see. Okay, so you can see that yardstick, that metal yardstick, is on that leading edge perfectly straight. But that number 3, is low. Rest of them are good. So if I glue number 3 rib down, it's going to force it down on the leading edge. I can pull it up, but what I thought about doing is sanding the bottom edge of rib number 3 till I get it up where it's supposed to be. And that's really the only issue I have right now. The rest of it's going together pretty good. I just wanted to dry fit the wing, because that's, as soon as I ran into that issue, I was like, wait a minute, I better dry fit the whole wing, all the ribs. And the rest of them look good except for rib number 3, and that's puzzling me. I'm thinking it has to do with, you know, the notch in the wing. I think they took this rib from the center and moved it here, which kind of raised it. You know what I mean? Because it's a wider airfoil. I'm thinking that's what happened. But if you take this yardstick and you put it in the notch, you can see it sets down on here. Rib number 3 needs to come up about like that. Let's see. They all need to come up a little bit. And this is, so rib number 10 and rib number 2. Rib number 10 and rib number 2 are going to be my guide, but man, this is confusing me. Not really confusing me, but it's making me worry that maybe I don't have the right parts to this kit. I don't know. So I'm going to, you know, rack my brain and figure out what we're going to do here. I already glued rib number 2 in place on the trailing edge. So it's going to be my definite start. So got to figure out what I want to do with the rest. Number 10 is pretty much where it's going to be too. So I don't know. It's straight going this way and it's straight this way. I just got to figure out what to do with these notches. Anyway, I'll get back at you when I figure something out. If I have to, I'll build the right wing, then show you what I did on the left. Worst case scenario. Hopefully I can figure it out and we'll show her the right wing. So we'll see. Okay, so I tried something different. I eliminated rib number 2 for now, and I put all the tabs down on the table, and they're resting on the table. I got all the ribs in the notches. They all line up in the notch. But look at this. There's rib number 2. It's either that tab's not right or the rib's too big. And if you see here, this yardstick is in those notches and they all touch. But look, it's about 3/16 low, or the notch is 3/16 too high on rib number 2. So I got to figure out what I want to do about this, because I can't continue this wing build until I get this figured out. I'm not going to start gluing stuff and then end up in a pickle. So what I'm thinking about doing is mock up the left wing right next to the right wing and experiment with that rib number 2. I'm thinking I need to shave 3/16 off of this tab. That's my initial thought. We'll see. Okay, so I've milled over enough, and I'm going to take the plunge, and I'll show you what I'm going to do. Basically, well, I'll bring you in. It's easier to show you as I'm pointing things out, but that laser cut number 2 rib is not right. So I will show you what I mean when I get you off the tripod. So first of all, I stacked all of these ribs up. I actually bumped it, so it's a little out of alignment right now, but all of them basically follow the same airfoil all the way back. And here's rib number 3 next to rib number 2. Let me line it up again. What I'm doing is putting the spar notches as even as I can get them and lining up. I drew center lines on all the ribs just to put my mind at ease that these ribs are all symmetrical, and they are. So as you can see on these, the airfoil, they're kind of an even space. I know they're not lined up correctly, but they kind of have an even space all the way back. So this one, 3 to 2, it's even here, but it goes from small to really thick and then back to narrow again. So what I'm going to do is I drew on the other side. Line it up again, try to. I'm going to trim that number 2 rib to where it's even, has an even amount. As you can see, it tapers off to nothing here. So, and the reason I'm doing that is if I just take that 3/16 off and drop that rib, number 2 ribs, the belly of it's going to rest on the table and it's going to kick up the trailing edge here. So I already de-glued this. It's not glued on anymore. Luckily I didn't destroy anything, but I didn't use any debonder. I just wiggled it back and forth and cut it a little bit with an X-Acto knife on the glue seam, and it cracked away, thankfully. But I'm going to make those adjustments on the number 2 rib. I have the pattern. If I mess this thing up, I have the pattern on my fuse plan, so I can always make another number 2 rib if I mess it up. But I'm going to trim this off, and we are going to place it in place to see how it lines up with that leading edge. If it lines up perfectly, then I'm going to go for it. I'm just going to start building the wings, but I'm tired of being stalled on my build, so it's a do or die situation. If I screw it up, then, well, I got the patterns, I can make another one. So let's get started in doing this. I'm going to use my disc sander and slowly sand this to the line. So we'll get started. Alright, that looks pretty good. We'll see what it looks like. Oh, I might as well sand that off while I'm here. Okay, so here's the old rib number 2. As you can see, the leading edge is definitely low. So let's take this yardstick back and we will see what happens here. This is real time. Oh, and I have to increase that 1/8 inch deep. So hold on, give me a second. All right, there is rib number 2 altered, and I think I need to come down just a hair more, maybe. Hold on. Maybe not. That looks good. Yeah, maybe a little bit more, like less than a 16th, but not quite a 32nd. So I'm going to shave a little bit more off the end of the, or the bottom of that tab, and then we are going to duplicate this for the other rib. So that way when I build both wings, they will both be identical. Okay, there it is. Rib number 2 in position. Looks pretty dang good. So that's what I'm going to do with the remainder of them. And all my spar notches are the same height too. Still got to adjust width. I took a piece of this, or I took one of the spars, and each one of those notches needs to be adjusted a little bit. But I'm going to do that before I glue these ribs in. That way when I put the spar in, it'll just set right in place. So now what we're going to determine is if these spar notches are directly on top of one another. The way I'm going to do that is with my clear ruler. So I have my center line on the rib, so I'm going to take that one line and just go up, and you can see that this edge here is going to be flush with that spar notch. But I already made the mark on this side, so you can see that much needs to be sanded off to make this perfectly on top of one another. So I did the same thing with the other side, only I flipped it around. You just take that line and you go forward until this is even with the ruler, and your red line is parallel to your center line, and then you draw your mark there, and I already made the mark. So that much has to be sanded off the bottom, that much has to be sanded off the top, and also after I sand that, I'm going to place the 3/8 square or 1/2 inch square, whatever it is, spar in there, and see how deep I have to cut that, because it has to be flush with the top of this rib, both top and bottom. That way when you put your sheeting on, the sheeting is going to go nice and even. You won't have to sand any spar off, which I've had to do in the past, but since I've been doing these for so long, I've learned to prepare your ribs before you start building. So that's what we're going to do for all 20 ribs, and I'll do that in fast speed, but basically that's how you do it. Using this clear graduated ruler, you can get perfect ribs top to bottom, or perfect spar notches top to bottom. That's the way I built my Lost Foam wing too. Anyway, we'll get started doing that, and I'll put you in fast speed. Alright, there's one side done. Those ribs are ready to be glued. I'm going to do the other side, and then we will start assembling the wing. Should go by pretty quick, hopefully. Okay, we will start with the plywood rib number 2. I have it lined up where it should be on the plan, and I'm keeping it close to this black line on the edge here. So I'm going to go ahead and glue it in with medium CA, just like I did the first time, but I was luckily able to break the seal or the glue joint. And that's all I'm going to do with that, because we have to, next we're going to glue this filler piece up against there. And I'm using this laser cut center rib to place it. So I'm going to use these to line it up so it don't move. This gets glued in. This is a filler block, and it gets glued in right here, flush with the center. So we'll go ahead and do that. And you know, if you don't use this as your guide and you glue this on, you're gonna be way off. And it is also not, it says it's supposed to be flush with the top, but this is nowhere near the right, it's nowhere near the right angle. So we'll fix that before we put the top trailing piece on. So I'm gonna go ahead and glue this in place. And I'm done with this. I'll use this as a guide for the left side as well. As long as you build exactly the same on the left side as you do the right side, you'll be all right. I'm going to wick some thin CA down in this joint here. It's not going to fill any gaps or anything, but I will put a little bit of this medium CA on there. Alright, we're going to call that good. So now here's where you use this spacing gauge, and it's going to go toward the trailing edge, and it's going to space this, the narrow side spaces 3 from 2. Then after that they're all spaced with the long side. So now we're going to place rib number 3, and I'm going to use my steel 90-degree pieces along with the spacer gauge, and you line it up parallel with the rib that's on the plan. I'm going to use medium CA. That thin must be getting old. Okay, we're going to line rib number 4 up. This one's using the long side here. I'm placing these on the rib number 3 to keep it from flexing while I'm using this gauge. And on rib number 4, I'm only putting a glue bead on this side because the other side gets cut off for the aileron. Okay, so now we're going to carefully cut this aileron loose right along this edge here. Got to be through. Alright, now it says to butt a 10 3/4 inch piece of 1/8 by 1/4 up against rib number 4, and I'm gonna pin it in place, and I'm gonna use thin CA to glue it down. Make sure it's straight, because you don't want any bow in your aileron. So what I'm doing, I'm pushing up against the pins and pulling back. So I'm going to put like 2 more pins in this thing. Okay. Now I'm going to run thin CA along this back edge. It should whip to the front. I'm trying to avoid this space as much as possible, so I'm going to start back a ways. I also beveled this end to match that rib angle. So now we're going to use a piece of 5/64 scrap and glue these trailing edge or aileron end pieces, I guess you'd call them, in. And I'm going to glue them in with medium CA on one side only for now. And you want to make sure when you do that it's pushed up against that. I think I'm going to use pins to hold it for now. I'm going to keep this scrap for the rest of my gaps so they're all exactly the same. Next it says to glue this plywood aileron horn backup D to the end of this aft spar in line with the aft spar, and then it doesn't say to, but I'm going to go ahead and glue this side in. But before I glue this in, I want to put my ruler up and make sure this is all perfectly in the same plane. So we will get this set, and I'll put my initial pin in. this should slide right in. So I'm going to first glue this down using thin CA. Okay, so what I'm going to do to make sure that this is in line, I'm using my T-bar sander, and I'm going to glue this in with medium CA. So I'm marking where I want to put my glue, and I'm going to be using medium. So now it says using the rib spacing gauge to continue on installing ribs. Now this spacing gauge, you want to keep it 90 degrees with the ribs. I'll have to admit, this is not the easiest Goldberg kit that I've ever built. Rib number 4 goes in next, and you want to make sure that you take your time, make sure it's setting down on your structure, and that it's running parallel to the plan rib, and that your spacer just goes in and out nice and easy, and it's 90 degrees to the ribs. Notice I'm only putting glue on the top of that one forward spar. So the same holds true with the rest all the way down, and there's something different we have to do when we get down there to 10. So I'm going to go ahead and put you in fast speed and install the rest until we get there. Okay, so the instructions say to use the gauge to put along the edge, and you mark this edge here and cut it. Well, I glued it all the way to the end, so after I cut this, I'm going to, sand that flat. It's no big deal. But you're going to use this edge as the edge to align rib number 10. I'm still going to use the gauge though. So what's going to happen here before I glue this, I'm going to have to use my spacer here and glue that in. So I'm going to be using thin CA here and just hold it till it dries or cures or sets, because I don't want a medium CA fillet on either side of this rib, and the reason being is hard to sand on this side for the wingtip, and I don't want a big fillet here because I'm going to be cutting right there. So I'm going to use thin CA. I'll use medium CA on that forward spar, but thin CA on the back side. Now we're going to carefully cut along this rib number 10. This will form the right side of the aileron. Okay. Now we're going to take the spacer and the other aileron tip. Going to do like I did before. I'm going to, pin those in place until I get glue down. Not only get glue on the inside. Okay, so the next step is to put the top spar in and the aft spars. So first thing I'm going to do, I have this 1/8 inch piece of 1/4 inch thick bass with 180 grit sandpaper on. I'm going to go through, before I even put that spar in, because I know it's 1/8 inch, I'm going to make sure that I have 1/8 of an inch, and if I don't, I'm going to sand it till it is. And because I have paper on there, you don't want to go all the way, just to paper thickness, I guess. I'm going to go through and do that to all the ribs, because we already know the spars cut already. So I'll go through and do all these now. Okay, that's that. Now we're going to get ready to put the main spar on. So what I'm doing here is pinning that square in position so that it doesn't move off of center. Okay, that should be perfectly centered. So now I'm going to concentrate on going down in my notches here. Take your time. You don't want to break a rib or stress a warp in it. Once I get it in position, then I'm going to make sure they're parallel, you know, all the ribs are parallel and 90 degrees, and then we will glue the spar in. Also want to put a straight edge across to make sure it's straight as well. Really pays off when you prep your ribs ahead of time. Looks like the leading edge is going to be good. All right, now we're going to make sure all our ribs are right. What I'm doing is pushing the spar against this 90 here and moving the ribs this way so it'll spring that way. Then I'll start straightening the ribs down here. Come down this way. That way, that will stay put. I want to make sure that 10 rib is straight. Well, there it is. Top spar is all in. Turned out pretty good. Next we're going to put the forward aft spar in, and then the aft spar in. That'll complete the aileron. Okay, we're done with this. I'm going to bring it down here, and I'm going to take those pins out. Can't really help you where we're at right here. I think what I'll do is put them in at an angle every so often. That way my wing doesn't develop a warp. Okay. So now I'll take my piece that I'm going to use. I'm going to match up that angle. That should fall right in place, and it does. Awesome. So I'm going to sand an angle right there. I think what I'll do is I'll use that I just used the plywood rib to make my angle. Now we will line this up. What I'm doing here is making sure that when I glue this down, it's at least straight, because you could glue like a, you know, starved horse effect, I guess you might call it, in that strip. So I want to use these things to make sure that it'll stay straight. That looks really good. So what I'm going to do is put a bead of glue on this side, let it set for a second, and then I'll put a bead of glue on the other side.
I got the cash in the bag, stadium packed. Born a rock star in this life, gonna live it up on the attack. Baby, I'm bad. I just wanna get caught up in this life. I'm crazy, I'm mad. Doing no cap. Only God wants you, better go live it up. Cash in the bag, stadium packed. Baby, I'm bad. Yeah. Baby, I'm bad.
I just wanna stay bad, stay mad. Chip on my shoulder cause they treat me like an outcast. I ain't gonna take that, stay back. I'll be swinging hard till the hits come in all caps. I ain't gonna lay back, pray that someone's gonna help me. Ain't nobody like that. I ain't gonna wait, that's all fact. Give me one shot and I'll never get the throne back. I'm sick of being cautious, I'ma go cause some pain, can't stop this. I'ma steal everybody's lane, call it shoplift. Sick of hearing everyone complain when they thoughtless. Taste the pain, it's like candy canes. It makes me go change into a better frame, into a better name. Society's insane, we all live for fame, yeah. Cash in the bag, stadium packed. Born a rock star in this life, gon' live it up on the attack. Baby, I'm bad, I just wanna get caught up in this life. I'm crazy, I'm mad, do it no cap. Only God wants you, better go live it up. Cash in the bag, stadium packed. Baby, I'm bad, baby, I'm bad. I got cash in the bag, stadium packed. Born a rock star in this life, gon' live it up on the attack. Baby, I'm bad, I just wanna get caught up in this life. I'm crazy, I'm mad, do it no cap. Only God wants you, better go live it up. Cash in the bag, stadium packed. Baby, I'm bad, baby, I'm bad.
So now we're going to install the aft spar. And you cut it to fit and go in between. So I think you know what I'm doing here. I'm making sure that it's pressed straight against the forward part of that aileron spar. Okay, so now we are to glue the leading edge on. Now, instructions say to put this on to the center line, which doesn't make any sense to me because all this gets cut out. But I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway, see what happens. I already sanded it to the right bevel, and I extended my center line out. That's not there because of the notch, so all this is going to be held in place. I'm going to take two of these first. And the way we're going to do this is, some of these notches aren't perfect, so I'm not going to stress out over it. I'm just going to make sure this leading edge is straight and they're pretty much in the notches. Sometimes you got to twist them a little bit to get them to set in right. Either way, I'm going to be happy with it. I really don't have a choice. So let's check, make sure we're straight. Dead on, balls accurate. It's perfect. And perfect. Oops. Yep. So that's how we're going to do it. So what I'm going to do now is go down through and make sure all these are straight. Alright, there it is. I'm going to leave some of these set because there's a slight gap that needs to harden before I let go of it. Alright, quick once over. I'd say it turned out pretty good. Next step is to put the trailing edge sheet on, and we'll get to that here in a sec. Okay, the next step is to sand the top of the ribs flush with the trailing edge. And what I'm going to do is I have to take my razor plane and get this filler piece to be the same angle, which will be easy. Got to unpin here, basically unpin anywhere that I might move the pins, move these pins to the inside so they keep everything straight where they're supposed to be on the plan, and just remove these back or rear facing pins. Might put one in the side here, both sides maybe. And we will get ready to install the top sheet. So basically what I'm going to do, where these taper, I'm going to like taper the back of this balsa wood sheet here, just so I get a good glue joint on the trailing edge. I want to make sure that this goes on perfectly, and what I'm going to do is use the old T-bar sander when I put that sheeting down. That way it will make sure that it is perfectly straight and flat, and it'll get a good glue bond. So we will get set up and glue this trailing sheet on. Then the next thing is the leading edge. Then we do the center sheeting, tip sheeting, and install all this. And when I finish this right wing, that's going to be one video, and the right wing's only going to be half done. So it's going to be maybe a 3-part wing build. So we'll see how it goes. Let's get set up and get this thing done. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to move these pins to the inside. Remove all the rear facing pins. And we're going to razor plane this trailing edge. And you got to be careful because you can easily take too much off. So I'm going to get down and look. I'm going to stop right there. Now I'm going to use 80 grit just on this part. Until I get it flush with the top of the rib. It's kind of important that this has to be flush with the top of the rib because that next sheet's going to glue on top, and that's where your wing bolt is going to go through. So that's why you want this to have a perfectly flat surface and a good glue bond. So I'm just test fitting to see how it's going to look on here. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to be happy with that. Now we're going to lightly sand this trailing edge Make sure all those ribs are even. I'm using 220 on a 22-inch sanding bar. Yeah, you want to make sure that all these areas are flush. And we'll place this again. And what I'm going to do to make sure when I glue this that it's going to be lined up on the edge, I'm going to place pins along the edge of my trailing edge here. So when I place this, after I put the glue down, I'm going to put it against those pins and lay it down and use my long T-bar to press it in place. I only got one shot at it, so I want to make sure everything's set. Now I'm going across this trailing edge and get rid of some of that glue. So now I marked where that spar is in the center line, and I made it a little bit beyond, so I want to be able to sand to that spar into the end here. So I'm going to cut with a sharp knife. I'm going to cut this at the angle needed. So there, that's cut flush. So that's that. Now we're going to get set up to do the leading edge sheeting. So before we do the leading edge sheeting, we want to go through and make sure that our airfoil goes right into that notch in the leading edge. This rib here, the rib number 2, is going to need a little adjustment. It's no big deal. Just we'll just sand a little bit away, and we'll kind of like match the airfoil to the rest of the wing. And we're going to place this straight edge on there. And any jig tabs that need adjusted, I put folded pieces of paper under. I only had 2. The rest of them seem to be pretty good. And that'll get me a perfectly straight leading edge. So we'll get set up. I looked at all of them, and I think there's only a couple that needs a little bit of a sanding. This one needs a lot. I'm using 80 grit sandpaper on it to make it faster. All right, that's it for me. I'm going to take my 220 and just give them all a quick swipe. All right. So that right there is prepped and ready for sheeting. Okay, the plans say to take the remaining the sheeting that's left over from the trailing edge sheets and to measure 5 3/8 from one end and 3 7/8 from the other, and with a straight edge cut along that line, and I will be sanding that square because cap strips will be going up against it, and I want them to be square too. So, and you go from the leading edge. I'm going to make this. I guess I can make the other side leading edge. Maybe I can get away with that, get that knot out of there. Well, there's a knot there too, so it really don't matter. So 5 3/8. No, it's already 5 3/8. 3 7/8. And just barely give you enough. So this is going to go all the way to the edge of this one. And remember, you want to let the knife do the work. Don't press down, or you'll be in for a world of hurt. So this is going to go on there like this. And when you put this on, it should that'll give you a nice little ridge. So we're going to place this. They have it started on the leading edge, so I'm going to tape this leading edge in place. Okay, leading edge sheeting is installed. Did you get all that? You probably didn't, because I didn't press the record button. What a dummy. Anyway, I'm going to show it on the next half. So I'm going to do the left side in fast speed when I go to do it, and then I'll go to normal speed for the leading edge sheeting. There's the back side. Oh well, you know, starting to look like something. So I went and pre-fitted all my center sheeting for the wing. And the way I did that, I placed the top and the bottom with the 4 1/2 pieces in. Then you have this one piece that goes in. I sanded each edge like I do my normal deal with the permagrit, so it's all square. And this wedge piece, I just had to basically sand it until it fit, and it just barely makes the center. So I'm going to go ahead and join these off camera. Then I'm going to sand them smooth, and we'll place them up on the wing, and I'll bring you back when I'm ready to do that. So it was mentioned in one of the groups I'm in on Facebook that these square holes, they tend to like crush where these pieces are right here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take some vertical grain balsa and just glue them to the inside to strengthen this area. And I'm using really lightweight balsa, so it ain't going to make much of a difference. But I'm just going to go just across those pieces, the lightning holes. I'm going to avoid, I don't know if you can see this one down here. I'm going to avoid that one, but it's mainly up here from the servo to the center of the wing. That's really the only ones I'm going to do. I might do, I forget what rib this is, third from the end of the wing. I might do that one, but the rest of them aren't that way. So I'm going to go ahead and glue a bunch of these in, and that way that'll strengthen up that area. They were saying that they broke for some reason. I'm not sure how or why, but I'm going to try to avoid that and glue these in vertical. So there's one. Okay, that should take care of that. Okay, so now we got this all sanded smooth, and I used the kit wood for this mainly because it's a little bit stiffer in this area. So basically what I'm going to do, I'm only going to glue to these two ribs, and the top and bottom I'm going to use thin CA on. And a little filler in there. Very little right there. All right, now we'll do the same thing down here. And that is the center sheeting. So now we use a flexible ruler and trim the sheeting flush with the wing's center line. Try not to put my weight in that on the wing. Yeah, fiberglass tape will go over that. That looks ratty as heck though. Crap. Alright. Now we'll move on to the wingtip sheeting. So before I mount the wingtip sheeting, I'm going to sand it square using my Perma-Grit and a T-bar sander. Now I'm going to have to trim either this one, probably this one, to make sure that it fits in there perfectly. So now we will test fit. I'm going to put this one under this, because this is the one I'm going to trim before we glue them together. That's the old trim upside down with your non-dominant hand trick. So there's a gap there, but I have room to scoot this forward, so I'm going to sand these again and we will get them glued in place. Alright, we got it pretty much where I want it. I'm going to get ready to glue this in. Like I did with the other one, I'm just going to glue it to the ribs. And we'll use thin CA to glue it to the rest. Oh yeah. The gap filling technique works every time. That is pretty dang good. Okay, the last step we need to do before moving on, taking this off the board and starting the left wing, is to install the cap strips. I only got 5 of them to do, and we'll get set up and do that, and then we'll call this a video. Like I said, the next video, when I do the left wing, I'm going to do most of it in fast speed and bring you in whenever I do the leading edge sheeting, because for some reason I didn't press the record button, but yeah, it happens. So anyway, we'll get started and let's get this episode wrapped up. Okay, so to start off, I like to make a pen mark on the ends where the ribs are. That way when you go to line up your cap strips, you can get them lined up and centered. So we will get set up, and I got these weights setting on the trailing edge just to keep it flat. My leading edge somehow got a little warp in it, but I was able to fix it. As you can see, it is, it's kind of hard because one end's blurry, but it's pretty dang straight now. What I did was it was like, it had a curve like this. I'm exaggerating, but I just raised this up, put something underneath it, weighed down both ends, and then I sprayed that leading edge with Windex. Let it set overnight, and it fixed the warp. So that's something to look out for when I do the left side. So let's get started on these cap strips and get this episode done. Okay, so we will start off. I'm just going to square off one end. Not that they're hard to cut or nothing, just trying it. You always want to dry fit everything first. That looks pretty good. And you want to always smooth out the edges a little bit as much as you can. But mainly all this is going to get done prior to covering. and I like to soften the edges on the corners. So that's one, and I'll continue to do the other ones in double speed, or whatever you want to call it. All right, there it is, the finished top wing half, right wing. Cap strips are on, and I trimmed this wing tip edge. It's nice and flush to prepare for the wing tip after the two wing halves get joined together. This will complete episode 3. Turned out really, really nice for a first time Sukhoi build. I think I did okay. So avoided a couple catastrophes, and I'm happy with it. So this completes the right half wing top in episode 3 of the Carl Goldberg Sukhoi SU26MX build. I think this is a good stopping point because the next step is to take this off the table and start building the right or the left wing. Don't want to build 2 right wings, that would be bad. But happy with the way it turned out. I'm only going to need a little bit of filler, which is a good thing. Tried my best to use no fillers. I don't need any filler here in the center section, just right where the seams are, just a little bit right here, and just a little bit on this seam here. But it turned out really nice. I'm happy with it. It's nice and straight, and look forward to seeing both wing halves together, put it together. So if you like this type of content, please consider subscribing to my channel. Hit that notification bell so that you can be notified of future episodes of this build series. And please like and share my videos. It just might help somebody get their plane finished and in the air. So until next episode, thanks for watching.